the student, the athlete, the culture. Welcome back, everyone, to the second series of Moses Squared podcast. It's been a while since our last episode, but we are back and better than ever. We are now streaming episodes on Apple Podcasts, so make sure you subscribe to our channel, as well as YouTube and Instagram, and leave a review. Now, let's get into episode 7, A Killer Tale.
Welcome back to Moses Squared podcast. We appreciate you guys tuning in. I'm here with my sister, Lauren Brielle. It's your boy, Desmond Moses. And today we're breaking down the series that everybody's talking about, super popular, A Killer Inside. In my opinion, Lauren, the title of our episode, which we kind of talked about, I think this was a killer tale. You know, I thought it was interesting how they told the story of this man's life. A lot of opinion, a lot of outside voices, sources that I didn't see very relevant in his life when he was here. But what do you think about this documentary overall?
I think it was entertaining. That would be the one word that I would use to describe the docu-series. I mean, they did tell a tale. Like you said, they brought childhood friends in. They brought family members in to talk about their version or their perspective of this man's life. And I think the order of how they put together the episodes was interesting. It wasn't very chronological. It was more so, about experiences. And so it's hard to talk on experiences of a man that's no longer living. So that was my take on, the fullness of the docuseries.
I thought it was odd. I think there was a lot of different stories, a lot of different angles that were told. And unfortunately, Aaron Hernandez is not here to speak for himself. But it's clear that this young man battled with some mental stuff, some mental illnesses that were very serious. Even after he passed away, I believe they had his brain studied. It was one of the most. It was an aged brain. They said it was about a brain of a man that's usually 80 years old, which for a 27, 26-year-old man, however old he was when he passed away, that's scary, And it actually makes me go back and think now of a lot of my peers and a lot of guys in the NFL now. Imagine how many guys are playing with this type of mental illness, these type of scars on their brain that just won't heal.
Yeah, and we talked about it earlier in the week about, like, whenever you get to the NFL, you've usually been playing since you were about how old?
At least 10 years old. I mean, that's on the older side now. Most kids are playing at 6 years old, which is unbelievable.
So young. And for Aaron Hernandez, who also had a traumatic childhood, you put those two things together, that doesn't make for a healthy childhood at all. And a lot of his peers and his family members talked about that, but it's like, where was this kid's help? A lot of times we're on teams and we have that support. We have those teammates who are like, hey, you okay? Like, your parents good, your family good? And it's like, a lot of people knew what he was going through, the loss of his father, his relationship with his mother. I feel like those were things that were all pretty out there in the open, and I'm just curious to know if those people who were talking on his life now were there when he was alive.
Well, it's interesting because he had a lot of trauma. He dealt with a lot of different things as a kid. It seemed like they portrayed his father as somewhat abusive and alcoholic, which for a young man can be very, very scarring.
For sure,
You don't know how people internalize these different things and how they grow to internalize and how it affects their behavior. But, without making excuse for any man, it's always sad in a sense to see somebody that had so much talent, all the way back to high school, the stories that they told, people talked about how popular he was, how nice he was to people. Yeah. Maybe there was some demons that came out of him when he drank. A lot of the trouble that surrounded, his name happened later at night, in the evening, after the club, around the club, before the club, so it's sometimes people, they get a little drink in them and they turn to a different person. Sometimes they revert back to some of those things they've seen in their childhood. But it's just sad, to see a young man in his prime essentially have a chance to set his family up forever, just signed a huge contract, $40 million, and still it didn't make him think twice about risking it all. So that just really tells me that he was dealing with something more between the ears. It was mental, because most people would say, even as a killer, For 40 million, I'm gonna chill on this one. I mean, that's reality.
I mean, personally, you give me that much, I'm going to stay in my room all day.
Sure, sure.
But question for you is talking about the money aspect. I put on my Instagram story just asking people's thoughts on this docu-series, and one of them said, money clearly does not cure all.
Yeah,
It makes you comfortable, but that's about it, is what I did get one of the responses. And when you think about, him living this life of NFL, he's super young kid. He's in the NFL, but he also has, trauma from his childhood, acting like someone he isn't. What are your thoughts on, living outside of yourself, especially when you have access to all that money?
yeah. You know what? And a lot of guys in NFL, these guys are just humans at the end of the day, but a lot of guys deal with a number of different things, and he may even have had something prior to the head trauma. He could have been dealing with some schizophrenia, some multi-personality. You don't know what these people are going through. And a lot of times, obviously years of trauma to the brain never helps. Having these things hidden instead of addressed never help. The fact that he grew up in a culture where he probably didn't feel like he could go and get the help that he needed without feeling like a lesser of a man. That was one of the things that they said a lot about his dad was, the response most of the time was just man up. We don't do no homosexual stuff here. And it's like, if that really was who he was, a homosexual man, and he had to suppress himself to fit in his own home.
Yeah.
This person's dealing with a whole lot of pressure that even for a child, even for a person that seems like they have it all.
And we see that a lot now, and it's sad. I mean, like, a lot of kids are, turning to other things because they don't get that support and that love from within their own home because of who they choose and want to be. So next question for you, the NFL. Part of this documentary, you see a team real estate agent, was it?
Right.
Buying, or not buying, or helping Aaron Hernandez coordinate plans to get a new apartment outside of the
Sure.
one he has with his fiance and child. Is that something that you've seen in the past? Is that something normal? And in his situation, when, there are already issues with him in the law, how does that seem like something that would be helpful rather than hurtful, which it did become?
Right. And I think you hit it on the head. It's the fact that the team did set it up. At the end of the day, the Patriots removed themselves. They separated themselves clearly from Aaron Hernandez once all this stuff hit the fan. But the reality is they did have some inclination that this was going on. When a man has a mansion on one side of town and has a trap house on the other side of the town where he spends more time, that should be a red flag. And not only because he's away from his family and his loved ones a lot of the time, but, you don't know exactly what he's doing over there, how he's coping, if he's by himself, if he's in danger. I mean, the fact that the guy's worth $40 million and he's in a trap type, in an apartment type area. I mean, his safety in itself was in jeopardy. So I think it's a shame, because I think he could have gotten help sooner. For a person that seemed like he was trapped in his own mind, his own body, even hearing his voice on the prison tapes, he just seemed like he was at a disconnect. He seemed more at peace in jail, which was odd for a man who had it all.
Very odd.
So those are just things that stood out to me. It's like, at the end of the day, it seemed like he just wanted to be loved. It seemed like he was searching for some love and some just love, someone to love him for him. And essentially, it sounded like his aunt was the only person that really did that. But that's a shame, and it really just, it's a testament. It goes to show we got to start supporting one another more often. Our family members, our friends. We're in such a judgmental state right now as a society. I think this is a perfect opportunity and should shine some light on the fact that we need to support each other. You don't have to like everybody's decision, and no man is perfect. That's the beauty about the grace of God. But at the same time, we as humans, we're not here to judge others. We need to support one another, uplift one another, and spread some more love, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree anymore. And honestly, there's been conversations that I've had with my friends about this documentary, and the word that's been thrown out there is like, I don't have sympathy for him. Sympathy and empathy are very similar words, but also very different. And I can say that I do not have sympathy for him, but I do have empathy for him, because as another human being, you never know the struggles that people are going through, right?
Right.
And for him, like you said, to have it all at one point in his life, there's no way that it was one incident that, just ended this all for him, that just sent him down that road of wanting to kill anyone, let
Right.
alone a family member. Like, those are things that don't happen overnight.
Yeah.
And so the support, like you talked about, is huge. And one artist, or former artist, I guess you could say, that is taking heed from his peers and his friends about getting mental health is Ras B. Do you remember
Okay.
him from the B2K?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've seen a lot of people in the media and celebrities, acting out on social media. Ras B was one of them. We've seen football player Antonio Brown
Sure.
acting out. We've seen just different celebrities. And so he, this week, checked into a self-care facility, which I've never heard of. You always hear like mental health facilities, things like that. But I think a few years ago, he opened up about being molested by a family member, and he's, that's kind of just set him off. And so just having to rehab that and stuff like that. So, there are people out here who are taking heed and listening. It's just sometimes you want to get to them before it's too late. And in this case, it seems like it is. But for others like Delonte West that we've also talked
Yeah.
about, it's hard because you have to want it at the end of the day.
Everybody's different. He was a different type of person. You could already tell, but it's just sad to see these people, give so much to organizations, the NCAAs, the St. Joe's, the NBAs, all the teams that he were a part of. And then to see how disconnected they are from a man, in such a short time. And I say that to say this, is that a lot of guys, more than anything, when they leave the league or leave, the pros, they miss that sense of brotherhood, that acceptance, that ability to go up to the stadium, the ability to go see their guys. Yeah, that ability to be at the games. And it's like, I think all leagues, NBA, NFL, NHL, MLB, need to support their athletes after the game, more after the game, because that's the first thing that, for guys, makes them go into seclusion. I've seen, even good friends of mine, guys that made millions of dollars,
Yeah.
2/3 of the year inside their house, just because they don't know exactly where to fit in society. And that's a lonely feeling. I've had a college teammate that committed suicide 3 years after he left the NFL. A guy that I came in, started college with at the University of Iowa, Tyler Sash, rest in peace. And it's saddening because we know, being his guys, that the thing that really broke his heart was the fact he couldn't go back to Iowa. He couldn't be a part of the family. He couldn't be, and it's like, you've literally risked your life. We go out there and bang heads as football players. It's not a sport where, you get to shoot jumpers and just get to throw. I played all three sports, so I understand and I respect all of them. But football is different. You're literally leading with your head, leading with your life, your brain, where your thoughts start. And it's like, you do that because you're preached at his family, your brothers. And so we need to embrace that as an organization,
Yeah.
The big guys, and really just reach back and I think hug our brothers, even our older ones, the OG, the retired guys.
Yeah.
It's a space for it. It's a huge industry.
I don't follow the NFL as closely as I follow the NBA, but just seeing the brotherhood that the NBA players have with one another on different teams, it is different, and it's a lot more open. I don't know. I always say that the NBA is more open because you can see their faces,
Right.
and you know who it is, and you don't have to search for their number and try to say, wait, is this him? Like you do with the NFL. But back to the Delonte West, I'm not sure if everyone knows the situation, but earlier last week, a video surfaced of Delonte West being beaten up in the middle of the street. I believe it was actually in D.C.
Was it? Okay.
Which is, my backyard in Maryland. But so he was beaten up in the middle of the street, and then I guess when the police arrived, someone was recording him, and where he was just cursing at the camera, not really making a lot of sense, and a lot of people have been talking about it. And one of the things that I noticed, or I remember from about a year or two ago, was his brother coming out saying that he was bipolar.
Gotcha.
And that was something that he was dealing with. And at that time, people, reached out and said, hey, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're, whatever we can do to help. But I don't know if there was a lot of action. And then when you see something like this
Right.
happen, and, you see that same type of outpour of concern, what does it take to really just
Absolutely.
help?
And like we just discussed, I think it's more of the embracing from the associations altogether. These guys are even with the Orlando Browns. The young man that came out speaking on Nick Cannon. I seen his child's mother speak on it. Essentially, she said it was the lack of attention there. The disconnect, the lack of acceptance from that point. And it's almost like a cry for attention along with help. But I think at the end of the day, as men, women, no matter what color you are, if you look in the mirror and you understand and you don't feel like you're yourself, you don't feel mentally strong, healthy, it's time to start seeking that help. I grew up in a culture as a black male that, you were encouraged just to be tough, just don't cry, don't be, what I'm saying, just deal with it. And the older we get, the more we understand. I was a sociology major. We start to understand more that that's not the way. Even our parents who were taught by our grandparents were understanding that there's another way. It used to just be a no talk. This is punishment. Just don't ask me why, and now it's more of a, this is why. And if you go against what I'm saying, there will be a punishment. There's just different state. We understand that communication and conditioning has advanced, but we also need to advance in a sense of getting help for one another and helping ourselves.
And speaking on that discipline aspect, another thing that was brought up with the docu-series was that Aaron Hernandez didn't have discipline as a kid. He didn't have, that, although he was close with his father, he didn't have that relationship with his father, that where he was, at some, black kids, they scared of their parents.
Right.
Like he didn't have that fear. And I feel like, we growing up in the same household, we had that fear.
Sure.
I personally feared daddy a little bit, just a little bit. But when you think about how much discipline you had at such a young age and the way that your parents got through to you, he clearly didn't have that. And how important is that to have and to instill in your children so that they don't go out in this world and, do things that aren't like themselves.
Yeah. And not to get too religious, but on that tip, I'm looking at your shirt. God is dope, and I think that's one of those things that people really overlook now. We try to read so much into stuff, but how we were raised, God was first, what I'm saying? And that's what always kept us on track, and again, we speak about being perfect. Nobody's going to be perfect. Throw all that out the window. The facts are God is dope, and that's what allows us to keep our moral pulse, or whoever you worship. I think religion is the piece that wasn't mentioned in this. Nowhere was that really mentioned, or whether it was accepted or not. I don't know. Some people, Catholic Church and different stuff. I know they have different things that they live by. It's more strict, and sometimes this alienates people. I know religion can alienate some people, but at the end of the day, I think one of the most important elements of being a human is the spiritual part. That's what allows us to stay on track. To keep some of these strange thoughts out. That in addition with, seeing a professional when you do need that help, because health, in a sense, all together is a combination of mental health, physical health, and spiritual health. If you work on those daily, weekly, yearly, you try to grow as you go, generally you have success.
Yeah, and that's a great segue into the next topic, but also something that we want to touch on in our next episode, which is, medicating at a young age. This is something that you have talked about recently, and we've seen artists, we've seen artists who have been dying because of the abuse of substances, and a lot of things, or for my instance, at least for my experience, there's a lot of people my age who are medicating at a young age because they're dealing with depression and they're dealing with anxiety, a topic that has sparked us in the past 10 years, I believe, and younger, these kids are taking medication to, suppress those feelings, which I have an open mind about. However, when it starts to get into the hands of people who have a lot of money, who have a lot of trauma, and who are living, a dark life, it can become very toxic and sometimes deadly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of my favorite artists were lost in the past 2 years, the Mac Millers, Juice WRLD. I mean, these are young, talented artists, 21, 20, 19 years old that are passing away I mean, even the lean that's, these young kids are drinking, we got to slow down. To my young brothers, to my young sisters, the PSA, we got to slow down. You got one life to live, one body. This is one vessel, one temple. Love it like it should last, because it is. We get one time to do this. So, I think this goes out to all our listeners, man. Just know that we love you. We're going to get into this next week some more. But until then, peace and love. We appreciate you guys tuning in to Moses Squared Podcast. Stay updated on the podcast. Follow me at Twitter and Instagram at Desmond M, DezManM.
You can follow me on Instagram at Lauren.Brielle with 2 E's at the end, and on Twitter at Lauren_Brielle with 2 E's at the end. However, to stay updated on everything Moses Squared, follow us on Instagram at Moses Squared Podcast, which is all one word. There, we will be posting everything from sports news to IGTV videos and more. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll catch you next time. God bless.